Nebula's nightmare. The engine of our rented boat hummed steadily, slicing through the calm, azure waters that stretched endlessly towards the horizon. There was an air of excitement among us, a group of 5 friends, as we headed towards what was promised to be the untouched paradise of Isla Nebula. I, Alex, had always been the adventurer of our group, constantly seeking the next thrill. This trip was my idea, sold to the rest by tales of exotic wildlife and unexplored territories. We had all needed an escape. Life back home had become a monotonous blend of work and fleeting weekends. This vacation was our chance to break free, even if just for a while. The island, a remote dot lost in the vastness of the Pacific, was rumored to host an abandoned research laboratory. It was a detail that piqued my curiosity, adding a layer of mystery to our adventure. As we approached, the island rose from the sea like a green jewel. Its beaches were pristine, lined with palm trees swaying gently in the breeze. The interior was dense jungle, promising the thrill of discovery. We anchored our boat and set up camp on the beach, eager to explore. The first day was spent reveling in the island's natural beauty. We swam in clear waters, lounged on the beach, and as the sun began to set, we shared stories around a crackling fire. It was the perfect beginning to our adventure, or so we thought. Our discovery of the laboratory came on the second day. While hiking, we stumbled upon a structure overtaken by the jungle. Vines and moss clung to its walls, and its windows were dark, giving it an eerie presence. Curiosity drew us inside, the thrill of uncovering its secrets bonding us in shared anticipation. The interior was a time capsule of scientific endeavor. Papers littered the desks, and vials of unknown substances filled the shelves. It was in disarray, as if abandoned in haste. Among the papers, we found disturbing notes on genetic experiments, creations that were never meant to exist in nature. Our initial excitement turned to unease as the reality of what this place represented began to dawn on us. But it was the discovery of a cage, large and reinforced, its door ajar, that sent a chill down my spine. Whatever had been held here was no longer confined to the laboratory. As night approached, our unease grew. The isolation of the island, once a lure, now felt like a trap. We debated leaving first thing in the morning, but the allure of uncovering more about the laboratory's secrets held us in place. A decision we would come to regret as darkness enveloped the island and the true horror of Isla Nebula began to reveal itself. That night, under the cloak of darkness, we heard it for the first time. The unsettling cry of something not quite animal, not quite human, echoing through the trees. It was the first whisper of the nightmare that awaited us, a prelude to the terror that would soon engulf our paradise turned hell. The following morning, under the harsh light of day, the laboratory seemed even more sinister. We debated whether to explore further or leave the island, but our curiosity was a flame that wouldn't be easily snuffed out. Besides, there was a part of me that couldn't shake the feeling that we were not the only ones on Isla Nebula. Armed with makeshift weapons and a single flashlight, we ventured deeper into the laboratory. The air was stale, filled with the scent of chemicals and decay. It was a maze of corridors and rooms, each revealing more of the twisted experiments that had taken place. In one room, we found a series of cages, much smaller than the one from the day before, each containing creatures that defied natural order. Some appeared to be blends of different animals. Others were more plant than creature. They were pitiful, monstrous creations, and it was clear that whatever research had been conducted here was not bound by ethics or morality. It was in the depths of the laboratory that we found the project files. They detailed the experiments in cold clinical terms: genetic modifications, cross-species splicing, and something ominously titled Project Shadow. The goal, it seemed, was to create creatures capable of surviving in any environment. But the results were uncontrollable, dangerous. Our exploration was interrupted by a noise, a soft, scuttling sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. We froze, listening as it grew louder, closer. Then, from the shadows, emerged a creature that seemed to be part lizard, part insect. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural intelligence as it studied us, tilting its head curiously. The encounter was brief. The creature darted away as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving us in stunned silence. The reality of our situation was impossible to ignore. We were not alone. The island was home to these experiments, and the abandoned laboratory was their domain. Nightfall brought terror. The sounds of the jungle changed as darkness descended, filled with the cries of creatures that had no place in the natural world. Our campfire seemed to be a beacon, drawing curious and hungry eyes from the darkness. It was then that we experienced our first attack. A creature, more shadow than flesh, lunged from the darkness, its features a grotesque blend of human and animal. It was fast, and it was deadly. We barely managed to fend it off, suffering minor injuries in the process. The encounter left us shaken, our illusions of safety shattered. The night passed in a blur of fear and vigilance. We realized that we were not hunters on this island, we were prey. The laboratory's experiments, the creatures, had claimed Isla Nebula as their own. Our adventure had turned into a fight for survival, a test we were woefully unprepared for. As dawn broke, we made the decision to stay together, to find a way off the island. But the island had other plans. The creatures, it seemed, were not the only dangers lurking in the shadows. The very environment seemed to conspire against us, with paths disappearing and familiar landmarks altering as if the island itself was a living, breathing entity. Our journey back to the laboratory, in search of answers or a means of communication, was fraught with peril. We encountered traps, both natural and man-made, and the creatures became bolder, their attacks more frequent. It was during one of these attacks that we became separated. In the chaos, I lost sight of my friends, each of us running for our lives. I found myself alone, the sounds of the jungle around me a constant reminder of my vulnerability. It was in this isolation that I truly began to understand the horror of Isla Nebula. The creatures were everywhere, each more terrifying than the last. I witnessed the aftermath of their ferocity, the remnants of animals, and, I feared, humans, caught in their path. But it was not just the creatures that haunted me. It was the realization that the island held deeper secrets, ones that tied the abandoned laboratory, its experiments, and the creatures together in a narrative of ambition, madness, and horror. As I navigated the treacherous landscape, determined to find my friends and escape, I stumbled upon a revelation that would change everything. The mastermind behind the experiments, the architect of our nightmare, was not a faceless entity from the past. He was very much alive, and I was about to meet him. As I wandered the island alone, the weight of isolation pressed heavily upon me. Each rustle in the underbrush, each snap of a twig, sent my heart racing. The knowledge that my friends were out there, potentially facing horrors beyond imagination, spurred me on, despite the fear that clawed at my mind. My journey led me to a part of the island unnaturally twisted, where the very flora seemed to recoil in horror from the ground it sprung from. It was here, amidst this perversion of nature, that I found the heart of the laboratory complex, a sector previously unseen, buried beneath overgrowth and debris. In this secluded part of the laboratory, I uncovered the personal quarters of Dr. Emil Hartmann, the lead scientist whose ambition had birthed the terrors of the island. The room was a stark contrast to the chaos outside, meticulously organized, with walls lined with books and notes that chronicled the descent from scientific inquiry to mad obsession. Dr. Hartmann's journals revealed a man initially driven by a desire to revolutionize the world. However, as his experiments progressed, His writings became increasingly unhinged, detailing not just a quest for knowledge, but a god complex. He saw himself as the creator of a new world order, where his creations would inherit the earth. The revelations were chilling, but they also provided the first hint of hope. A mention of a communication system hidden within the island, installed as a fail-safe. Hartmann had been paranoid, fearing the outside world might seek to destroy his life's work. This system, if it still worked, could be my only chance to call for rescue. My search for the communication system led me deeper into the bowels of the laboratory, where I stumbled upon a section that was eerily preserved. It was there, in a lab that seemed frozen in time, that I finally met Dr. Emil Hartmann. He was older than I expected, his once dominant frame now stooped with age, but his eyes burned with the same fervor detailed in his journals. He greeted me not with hostility, but with the enthusiasm of a showman eager to display his magnum opus. Hartmann led me through his laboratory, proudly showcasing his creations through security footage, as if they were not monstrous predators but children under his guidance. He spoke of his work with a twisted reverence, revealing that the creatures were only the beginning. He envisioned an ecosystem where his genetically engineered beings would reshape the world, eradicating what he viewed as the flawed creations of nature. Our confrontation reached its zenith when Hartmann revealed his ultimate creation, Project Shadow, a creature designed to be the apex predator, surpassing even human intelligence and adaptability. It was this creature that guarded the path to the communication system, a final test of survival. Realizing that reasoning with Hartmann was futile, I made a desperate plan to reach the communication system. It involved navigating a labyrinth of corridors and avoiding both the creatures and Hartmann's surveillance. The path was fraught with danger, every corner potentially hiding one of Hartmann's abominations. But it was Project Shadow that terrified me the most. Its presence was always near, an oppressive force that seemed to mock my every move. Utilizing everything I had learned about the island and its inhabitants, I managed to evade detection and reach the communication system. The process of activating it was tense, filled with the fear that Hartmann would discover my intentions before I could finish. But luck, it seemed, was on my side. The system whirred to life, sending out a distress signal to anyone within range. All I could do then was wait, hide, and hope that rescue would come before Hartmann or his creations found me. In those final moments, as I hid in the darkness, the island felt alive with malice. The cries of the creatures filled the night, a cacophony of horror that seemed to celebrate the madness of their existence, and above it all, the haunting realization that I might not live to see the dawn. In the suffocating darkness of the laboratory's hidden corridors, my heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat heralding a showdown I felt ill-prepared for. The air was thick with the stench of chemical preservatives and decay, a grim reminder of the unnatural horrors that prolud the island. My only hope lay in reaching the communication system to call for rescue, but between me and salvation stood Project Shadow, Dr. Hartmann's magnum opus. Armed with nothing but my wits and a rudimentary understanding of the island's twisted ecosystem, I set about laying my trap for Project Shadow. My plan was simple yet fraught with risk. Use myself as bait to lure it into a section of the lab rigged with makeshift explosives, containers of volatile chemicals I had gathered. It was a desperate gambit, but desperation had become my closest ally. The wait was agonizing. Every shadow seemed to move, every noise a potential harbinger of my doom. But then, with the stealth of a specter, Project Shadow appeared. It was a nightmare incarnate, a chimera of flesh and shadow, its form shifting with every flicker of the dim lighting. I could see intelligence in its eyes, a malevolent cunning that confirmed Hartmann's claims. I triggered the explosives as it charged, the concussive force throwing me against the wall. Dazed, I scrambled to my feet, ears ringing, as smoke filled the corridor. Through the haze, I saw the creature rise, injured but not defeated, its resilience beyond natural ken. The explosion attracted Hartmann, who found me as I staggered through the smoke-filled corridors. His fury was palpable, his life's work threatened by my actions. But beneath his anger, I sensed fear of his creations, of the outside world, and of his own mortality. Our confrontation was brief. Hartmann, for all his genius, had not accounted for one variable: human desperation. I used his momentary distraction to push past him, heading for the heart of his operation, where the communication system awaited. Reaching the communication system was only the beginning. As I sent out the distress signal, I knew that surviving until rescue arrived was the real challenge. Hartmann, enraged and now openly hostile, unleashed his remaining creations in a final bid to stop me. The laboratory became a war zone, a maze of fire and shadow as I dodged both the creatures and Hartmann's attempts to thwart my escape. In the chaos, Project Shadow re-emerged, its form even more terrifying, wounds from the explosion knitting together in a grotesque display of its engineered superiority. The climax of our showdown came as I found myself cornered, Project Shadow advancing, its eyes filled with a hunger for vengeance. In that moment, I realized the true horror of Hartmann's ambition, a creature that could learn, adapt, and, most terrifyingly, hold a grudge. With no options left, I dove through a window, landing amidst the jagged rocks and surf below. The impact was brutal, but the cold shock of the water revived my senses. As I swam away from the island, Project Shadow watched from the shore, its form blending into the night. Hartmann's voice, carried by the wind, was a mix of curses and pleading, a madman lamenting the loss of his empire of horrors. Rescue came with the dawn, a Coast Guard cutter drawn by my distress signal. As we sailed away from Isla Nebula, the island seemed to recede into mist, a phantom land that would haunt my dreams forever. Hartmann and his creations were left to their dark domain, a world apart from humanity, a reminder of the perils that lurk in the pursuit of forbidden knowledge. I was the sole survivor of Isla Nebula, the only witness to its terrors. The authorities dismissed my account as the ramblings of a traumatized mind, the creatures of the island deemed figments of an overactive imagination. But I know the truth. The island exists, a dark jewel in the vast ocean, harboring secrets and horrors that humanity must never again attempt to unleash. As I write this, the memories of those days haunt me, a constant shadow that lurks at the edge of my consciousness. I've seen the depths of human ambition and the horrors it can birth. Isla Nebula remains out there, a warning to those who would play God, and I, the sole survivor, am left to carry the burden of its secrets, a lone sentinel standing watch against the darkness.